And there he was, falling, feeling, believing, until one day, that one moment, he saw. The state of nature versus the social contract. Today's episode will bear fruits to a very important question. That is, can we determine through our Creator's design and through ancient decrees of whether every human being was meant to be free on earth in a state of nature? These fruits will be brought forth by our explanation today of how every individual on earth is under a social contract to be free in their persons and to have their rights and property protected by their own government, separate and distinct from that of the state of nature, in which John Locke's Second Treatise of Government explains, where no government exists. Now, in order to understand a question you are trying to ask, you must get to the roots of the problem you are trying to solve. There are many people today who may still ask, what is a social contract? I must first explain what is the state of nature. And I will begin at its roots, which will bring forth fruits in the form of a question previously stated. That is, can we determine through our Creator's design and based on ancient decrees of whether every human being was meant to be free on earth in a state of nature? Within this specific question, we must first address the notion that there is a creator. Now, regardless of the title or face of the creator in any culture or society, I propose that there can be no serious arguments that a creator does not exist. In fact, most of the arguments presented to disprove a creator's existence points to the existence of a creator. For instance, take the Big Bang Theory. The Big Bang Theory is a claim that based on substantial specks of energy colliding at one tiny point, it exploded into billions of galaxies, which resulted in evolution, and we evolved within that evolution, and this is how we all got here today. In this theory, I propose that God is not disproved, rather, energy is proven to be a creator, hence a God. Whether that creator be tangible or intangible, no inhabitant of this earth can argue that something came from nothing. In essence, for the purposes of this argument, I assert that there can be no arguments that every living thing has a creator. Now that we have properly addressed what a creator is, let's represent the question to refresh the audience's memory. That is, can we determine through the creator's design and based on ancient texts or decrees of whether every human being was meant to be free on earth? Let's now take a look at the creator's design. Is not our entire ecosystem based on reciprocity with one another? A world without some of the most smallest organisms, such as bees, will bring devastating consequences to Mother Earth. The Earth atmosphere itself contains all of the world's oxygen that humans and animals need, while simultaneously protecting all of us from harmful ultraviolet solar radiation of our sun. The Earth itself creates the exact pressure without which liquid water couldn't exist on our planet's surface. Without our sun's rays, all photosynthesis on Earth would stop. All plants would die, and eventually, all animals that rely on plants for food, including humans, would die too. Even our moon makes Earth a more livable planet by moderating our planet's wobble on its axis. Now, of course, everything that has been stated is the resultant of a creator that no mere man has the power to do. However, we only prove here that the creator has decreed that life itself is sustainable on Earth by looking at the very blueprint of the creator's design, not how one's life shall be lived in this design, free or enslaved. On this planet, where by design, life itself is sustainable. Exiting that deep dive, the question must be represented. Has the Creator decreed that we be free on this earth? Was it not the Creator's intention that all inhabitants on this earth enjoy the full benefits of this masterful design without burden? Are one group of persons or people superior or inferior to the other? We must answer these questions now by looking at ancient texts or decrees in which we can find, which has been proven. If we cannot do so, we must now look to the Creator's design to answer that question. For further explanation and for an analogy that can be used later, take the gazelle and the lion. Imagine these two different groups of species came together to form a social contract. Let's take ourselves to the jungle into those negotiations. The gazelle comes to the podium and he states his case. He states that he and his family and his friends and his entire species has the right to roam the jungle without fear, anxiety, or worry of the lion eating them. You can imagine the applause the gazelle would receive from other species. However, the lion now speaks and states his case. And the lion states that to agree with the gazelle would be to extinct our species. For what if the gazelle is the only thing in the vicinity that we can eat at any given moment, time, or season? To agree with the gazelle would be to kill my entire pride. That light chatter that will come over the crowd would be to agree with the lion. That to agree with the gazelle would be to extinct his species. However, imagine the gazelle objects and he wishes to determine based on God's creation or any ancient decrees of whether or not the gazelle was meant to be eaten by the lion. Now, after these two species agree that there is no such thing as any ancient decrees or texts stating such, they must now revert to the Creator's design. And within these negotiations, it is concluded the following: that the gazelle is faster, if not just as fast, as the lion. He has the acceleration and agility that of the greatest NFL football player. However, the lion has the strength that 50 times greater than the gazelle. Therefore, it is concluded that by design, the gazelle has the speed, agility, and acceleration to avoid and evade the lion. However, if the lion is able to, through strategics or stealth, capture or catch the gazelle, by design, he has the strength to overpower the gazelle, and 98% of the time, he will win that battle. Therefore, it is concluded that by design, there is no such thing as the rights of the gazelle not to be eaten by the lion, just as the lion has no right to force the gazelle not to avoid or evade the lion so that it would not be eaten. By design, they are merely involuntary participants in the circle of life with the power, speed, and strength to avoid any specific demise from one another. Using this analogy, does a weaker human have a right not to be enslaved by a stronger human? Could the very fact that the Creator made such human, a weaker one, grant the stronger human a possessive right to the weaker one's person? If the Creator saw fit to not have the weaker human enslaved, why would he make the human weaker and the other human stronger? Maybe the weaker man or woman is smarter and can use their wisdom to enslave the other stronger human beings. We must now conclude and answer these questions the same way that the lion and the gazelle concluded their Pacific negotiations. Are there any ancient texts or decrees which states that one group of persons or people are inferior or superior to the other? If there is not any text, we must now resort to the Creator's design to answer that question. Now, the first thing that comes to mind in regards to any ancient texts or decrees is the Ten Commandments. Now, according to multiple religions, the Ten Commandments were revealed to Moses at Mount Sinai and were inscribed on 2 tablets of stone, and according to Christian beliefs, were kept in the Ark of the Covenant. However, some scholars disagree about when the Ten Commandments were written and by whom, with some modern scholars even suggesting that they were likely modeled on Hittite and Mesopotamian laws and treaties. Now, regardless of my faith, your faith, or any other person's or culture's faith or belief in the validity or stories about the Ten Commandments, the only thing that we can agree on for certain is that the only reason multiple scholars and religions disagree about when the Ten Commandments were written, who received them, and by whom, is because none of these group, persons, or people can present concrete evidence to the other group of persons or people about when the Ten Commandments were written and by whom. Therefore, we must now resort to the Creator's design to determine whether or not one group of persons or people are superior and inferior to the other. Now, based on my research concerning the biology of certain humans, I can get very and extremely deep on this specific topic. However, it is one specific saying which concludes that topic unnecessary. That saying is, he bleeds just as I can bleed. That is true for every Pacific man and woman on this planet. Therefore, notwithstanding the design of certain Pacific humans, if I am able to bring fear amongst a large amount of people, I can control and rule over them. If I am able to overpower a large group of people with strength, I am able to rule over them. If I am wiser than a large amount or group of people, I can utilize my intelligence and wisdom to rule over a large amount or group of stronger people, regardless of the strength that I hold. These states of nature. Can you imagine everyone acting as his own judge, answering to no one but himself? An independent nation within his own person, walking amongst other individuals who are also independent nations within their own persons. They are essentially their own presidents, their own governors, their own military commanders and sheriffs. John Locke himself proposed this question. If all men are king and subject to no laws, would this not bring chaos? Would not disputes over land and property be dissolved by fights to the death, absent the moral aptitude of right or wrong in that man? Imagine the clashes between two independent persons or independent nations within the persons. There will be no appeals, as one cannot appeal to the other. The only appeal would be to God himself. Equivalent to a state of mind, this is what you would call the state of nature. As John Locke put it himself, in the state of nature, again, every man is his own judge, and no one answers to no other but himself. There is no law but God's law in the state of nature. However, what effect does God's law have within the state of nature, which can help us answer the question of whether or not one group of persons or people were meant to be inferior or superior to the other? Now, notwithstanding our conclusion concerning the Ten Commandments, has not the Creator decreed that our souls will be judged based on our sins here on earth? And of course, we reach the same conclusion concerning the Ten Commandments about whether or not there is something greater than us that has laid a foundation about how we treat one another here on this earth, simply because one group of persons or people lack concrete and specific evidence to provide to the other group of persons or people about who, what, and when it was said. Therefore, we must resort back to the Creator's design to determine whether or not a foundation has been laid concerning how souls shall treat one another on this earth while in the state of nature. Now, I must state that there are a multitude of studies that provide the basis for this answer, and you may leave your thoughts in the comments. Now that we've answered the question of what the state of nature is, we can now see clear in our understanding and with clarity of what a social contract is. This society was erected for the benefit of the people in order to secure any insecurities that may have existed in the potential chaos arising out of the state of nature. This was a formation of a social contract between each individual citizen and his government. The individual's consent or contract with his government is simply based on the protection he receives or desires from that government. For instance, the Constitution of the United States is a social contract between the citizens of the United States and of the states thereof, who are quoting the Constitution, erected for their protection. For one quoting constitutional rights can only be construed of consent to be governed, for those rights apply to members in the society who are governed under the Constitution, which were designed by the people for their benefit. One may consider the Dred versus Scott decision, for example. The Supreme Court determined that Dred Scott did not have the right to sue nor be sued in their courts because simply Dred Scott was not a member of their society. The Supreme Court decision stated that the Constitution could not be construed or could not even be contemplated to be designed for such persons at such time. It was not until the 14th Amendment that individuals born or naturalized in the United States all fell up under the protection of the United States government. However, there is a quid pro quo for which a society can only operate. Every member who is under the protection of his government has an obligation of obedience to follow all of its laws. And this is merely because what society would a society be if neither of the citizens are obligated to follow the laws and orders of its government? As John Locke stated, that all men are naturally in the state of nature and remain so till by their own consents they make themselves members of some politic society. That politic society is the United States government, where rights are protected under a social contract, in which you, the citizen, are obligated to follow the laws of government. However, this obligation of obedience is only in return for the protection the individual receives from his government. This fact was stated in a United States Supreme Court ruling and even prescribed in the Georgia Constitution of 1861. This is what I have held as the protection for obedience doctrine, for which an individual is only obligated to follow the laws of his government only in return for the protection that he or she receives from their government. Using the lion and the gazelle analogy, the agreement between government and its citizens were negotiated in such a manner. This consent to be governed does not derive from any mere contract between a citizen, his governor, an officer, or judge. It is simply an understanding between government and citizens as it relates to the United States government. Now that we have an understanding of what the social contract is the United States government in breach of their social contract with its citizens? For this question has been asked not by me, but by others themselves. Things have only gotten worse and will continue to get worse. We have an overreaching government and an over-encroaching government that has seemingly lost their interest in what the people want and have decided that they will go for what only a few desire. I'm afraid if we continue down this path, then our United States and each of the states thereof will be no more than militarized states of nature. Until next time. Based on our projected path, if we continue down this route, our social contract will be scattered over the shores of liberty, and that our state governments will be no more than militarized states of nature. Until next time.